This movie is violent. Like, my God.
The main character pulls out a shotgun to shoot a child,
and then shoots himself.
He literally got a shotgun on the carpet. Up his ass. Up his ass, and he's alive.
That's 3 people that got their asses blown out.
When talking about the holidays, the Christmas season, everybody has their favorite holiday film, whether it be Elf, Die Hard, Jingle All the Way, Home Alone, and then you have Home Alone 1 and 2, but some people forget, hey, we got like a whole lot other Home Alone films, but it seems like after Lost in New York, Home Alone was actually lost as a whole, except right now, because on the podcast, people, we are going to be talking about Home Alone 3, which came out on December 12th, 1997. Kevin McAllister, nowhere to be seen. It is a brand new child, but he, my friends, is also Home Alone. And we're going to be talking about that right now on another episode of A Cast of the Past, coming at you each and every Sunday. This is the final episode of 2020, guys. So kicking it off hot and spicy from Boston, Mass. with Ryan McNulty. Man, like, this is it. We are ending the podcast this year with the very best, right?
I couldn't think of any other better way to do it than to end with Home Alone 3.
The third one, the one that everybody talks about. Is that right? From London, Ontario, Keith Hamilton, is that right?
You know, a long time ago, we said into a microphone that we needed to do all of them, and this is the price we pay for that.
And we totally did not almost forget to do that this year, right?
So no, not at all. Yeah. It's been the plan all along. We totally didn't just decide this about 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Was it just like our bodies telling us, hey, maybe it's fine. You leave. It's like Macaulay Culkin's gone, the Culk is gone, so why bother, right?
It's true.
Had you watched this film, Keith, in this case, before this episode?
I saw this movie in a theater when it first came out.
Ooh.
Man, that's a hour and a half I wish I could get back.
Do you remember Keith, what led to this? Like, Home Alone 3? Because, I mean, for context, people, so Home Alone 1 came out November 1990. 2 years after, we got Lost in New York. So we're talking back to back. But then 1997, so needless to say, a little bit of time went by. What was your hype level, Keith, in 97 for a new Home Alone film?
I don't know. To be honest.
Ryan, do you have anything? Ryan, give me something, Ryan. Give me something.
For real. It's 1997. I'm 7 years old. I guess I was excited because I liked watching the Home Alone 1 and 2 as a kid, like, on television. It's not something where I owned the VHS and would, like, put it in every year, and I needed to watch Home Alone. But they were fun movies, so I guess I was excited to see the way that the kid kills but doesn't kill adults this time, and compelled me enough to go see it in the theater.
What about you, Ryan?
So this is a movie where I vividly remember the trailers for, and this might be, you know, as a kid, you think a lot of movies are good, even if they're really bad. I feel like this might have been the first movie that I can remember where I saw the trailer, and even I, as a child, knew that this was going to be a bad movie. So I never saw it. This viewing for this podcast is the first time
really?
I've ever seen this movie. Yeah, I've never seen it before until this, you know, this past week.
I feel like out of all the movies, you know, we've talked about Terminator, and I even watching this movie, I'm like, I'm just going to start referring to this as the Terminator effect. Even though this movie came out like,
oh no,
what, 20 years before?
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but like I've had this analogy in my head since I watched it. Like Home Alone 2 to Home Alone 3 is identical to Terminator 2 to Terminator 3. It is an exact comparison. It seems insane to say, but that is how this movie lives in my mind.
The Terminator Salvation of
that's coming. There's still like 3 of these left.
That's
exactly.
True.
We're not dead. We're not dead. But everybody watching and listening, if you enjoy the podcast, you can leave a 5-star review. We talk about clearly anything on this podcast. And you can also join the community over at acastofthepast.com/Discord. I did not prepare any of these two men to do what I'm about to. Okay, that's just, okay. Okay, people.
Maybe start like that
one
over.
Of you two.
Yeah, I don't want to be home alone with you anymore.
No. I would like one of you two to explain the plot in whatever way you can for Home Alone 3. Who would like to go? Come on.
I'll try. So there's super secret agents and they get a microchip, but they put this microchip in the toy car. I think it's from the Air Force. I don't know. But then they take this chip, they put it in a car, and they're working for Korean terrorists that want that microchip, okay? Remember, this is a Home Alone movie, folks. Like, this is the movie where somebody got lost in New York and stayed at the plaza last time. So now these super secret agents lose this microchip in an airport, and little old lady takes their bag because she has an identical bag, and this is before airport security was insane. So things happen like that.
It's pre 9/11. It's more plausible.
Yeah, exactly. The agents stealing a microchip Air Force is
inside
totally
a toy
plausible.
Car, of course, dude.
Yeah, totally plausible.
Go on, Keith. Yeah,
so then,
I'm filling it in, yeah.
There's this boy that we're going to call not Kevin, because I don't actually remember his name. And
Alex. Another short name.
Alex, aka not Kevin, gets this toy car as a gift. And then he is this master engineer on a level that Kevin McAllister never was, and devises these murder devices to kill.
And Alex is 8, by the way. You forgot to point out, Keith. He's an 8-year-old
master engineer on a level that would make Einstein go, God damn that kid, and devises this jigsaw-like booby trap maze that these agents, these super spies, have to go through to get this microchip back for the Korean terrorists. And then hilarity ensues, I guess, but more likely murder ensues, and that's Home Alone 3 in a nutshell.
Yeah, because for context, in the airport, they figure out that, there's this old lady which had the bag, so they travel to Chicago, so there's like kind of your nod to Home Alone 1. And then they kind of know that there's, it's in one of the homes. It's like 12 homes, I believe it is. So they're basically going inside all of these homes. And look, I'll be perfectly honest. Like, out of all 3 films, this is by far the most logical Home Alone film. And that's saying a lot, right?
I'm sorry, what?
No, hey.
I will actually step in the defense of Juan here. And they actually did make a lot of efforts to kind of have things be plausible. With the reason why they're checking all these houses is because the cab driver said, oh, hey, it's at the one house that doesn't shovel the driveway. And then, of course, it cuts to Alex, who then shovels that woman's driveway. So they don't know which house it is in that end of the street. There's a lot of little steps that they actually take, and also the fact that, and the one thing I'll kind of say against the whole Terminator 2 to Terminator 3 comparison is they try to do things a little bit different. And that was, Alex is not home alone for the entire movie. It's kind of like a few separate occasions that he's home alone, which is a lot more realistic to what you would see. That being said, sure, they tried to take a more realistic approach for how he's alone and how some of the other things occur. A lot of the other slapstick stuff is way even more over the top, and also it just doesn't have the same spirit or anything. It has none of the heart of the first 2 movies.
And I'll give them credit because, for example, one of the things that they quickly established is he's got chickenpox. So that's why, okay, so that's why he's got to stay home. But then you're thinking, well, he's going to, he sees the burglar. So he actually calls 911 on multiple occasions. So I'm not talking about...
I'm sorry, say that again?
And 911. It's like,
there you go.
He calls 911. It's the same number, people. It's the same number. But the fact that, look, I'm not talking about the film. I'm saying that as a plot device, they did an exceptionally good job at being like, okay, I can see how there's a circumstance where nobody believes this 8-year-old child, even though it's like these 4 highly trained, spies can't even freaking get into these houses and all of that. And then all of this happens.
Okay. You could tell they actually put some thought into how all the events unfolded. So I'll give them credit for that 100%.
Is that necessary, though? are you going to look at that movie and be like, it's a little better because
Yes.
we really thought this one out?
I think so.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm kind of with Keith, where at the end of the day, right, the best movies, some of the greatest movies ever have plot holes, but if you do the other things good enough, then you're willing to overlook them. This movie, yes, they tried harder in trying to make things a little bit more logical, but at the same time, you also have, you talk about the kid being a super genius. What about that parrot? That parrot is
that parrot's amazing.
one of the smartest damn things I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That
so there's
rat,
just
though.
other things that are completely like baffling and illogical.
I think what I appreciated about that is, I mean, I think that Terminator is just going to be the thing we forever compare with any other movie, but it's because, look, this is not Kevin McAllister. So think about the expectation in the 90s, a new Home Alone film. I think a lot of people were thinking, well, how the hell is this kid going to be home alone? So I think they kind of had like this obligation to be like, hey, we are legitimizing the reason that this is happening, and I appreciated that. And if anything, I hate the beginning parts of Home Alone 1 and 2. I skip that. I just get the damn kid alone already or Lost in New York. Here, the fact that it's so outrageous, like it starts with like this plane shot, like Hong Kong. I'm like, what? How does one thing
For
take
the
the other?
first like 15 minutes, you're like, am I watching a
Yeah, it's
Home
like,
Alone movie?
wait. Is this like a pirated film? And I appreciated that. Now, okay, I'm going to do things a little differently. Usually I'll ask on a movie episode for overall impressions. I would like to start this off with Ryan because this movie got a 20-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, largely negative reception. Why is this a bad movie? And I'm not saying that it is, but if you were to make the case of why is this a bad Home Alone film or why it got crapped on upon release, having watched it for the first time now, why do you think that would be?
I think there's a number of reasons. One, I think they do spend a little bit too much time on these like super terrorist people or whatever they are. They spend a little bit too much time trying to they spend too much time on the plot and really not enough on like kind of the heart of the movie. The acting is also just not nearly on the same level. The characters just aren't as memorable. It's really tough. Look, child actors, it's an uphill battle. You get a lot working against you. Macaulay Culkin, it was just a standout child actor, and you just don't get that very often. So it was going to be difficult for any kid to be able to come in and put on the same level of performance as Macaulay Culkin, and that's what carries the movie. And if you're not going to have a kid that just like hits that same level that Macaulay Culkin hit, then it's just not going to be that movie, because really a good child actor has to carry the film, and it just doesn't happen here. So that's probably the biggest reason. And then it's hard to also top, how do you top Joe Pesci? You know what I mean? Like the villains also have to be good, and they just weren't as good
The
either.
overall chemistry between those two, I mean,
and it also felt like they were just trying too hard and going even more over the top with the gags at the end, and it just didn't hit the same mark. It was just beyond absurd what some of the stuff that they did.
Mm-hmm. Going back to my Terminator 2 to 3 comparison, the heart of the movie is really where that lies, because you've got this great film in Terminator 2 and Home Alone 2 that they hit a formula and they hit everything that you need out of that movie, out of that respective movie. In the case of Home Alone 2, it's fun, it's a little over the top, and the actors there are great at what they need to do. Like, you believe Kevin McAllister as this kid that's, well, home alone or lost in New York, and you believe Joe Pesci as like a fun bandit that's out to kill said Kevin. It felt like in this movie, much like in Terminator 3, that Home Alone 3 just tried to replicate that, but didn't fully understand what made it as good as it did, beyond the fact that, like, okay, well, everybody must like the crazy stunts in Home Alone 2, so now just make the stunts crazier.
Yeah, they had to lean on that because they just didn't have the acting, they didn't have the quality of actors.
So then you have
were working with.
Yeah, then you have this soulless movie that just didn't, like, they put the check boxes on a piece of paper of what they needed to hit, but they weren't able to actually check them off. And that's kind of what Home Alone 3 is to me.
At least for me, I'm a little bit torn because it's like whenever you watch one of your favorite bands, you go to a concert and you know that they play the greatest hits. And you're not blown away by it, but you're like, all right, like that's the song that you played, and you played it, and you played it well. You're not like more excited than the first time you saw it. I think the problem is that you had the first Home Alone that just did such a great thing in 1992. Like, it's like what Ryan said. Macaulay Culkin is just an incredible child actor, perfectly cast for that. So the standard that he set is so high, and then you take that story and plot to frickin' New York.
Yeah.
So it's like you've capped it. You can't do more than that.
To go back to your analogy, it's not like watching your favorite band play their greatest hit. It's like watching the cover band play the greatest hit.
I think that's exactly it.
Exactly. Now, the positive things about this movie is, like, I'm not going to sit here and crap on it and say it's a bad film. I think that there are legitimately a lot of things that I enjoyed about it. I will agree with Keith that it was like a little bit soulless. And I think that out of all the films we've talked about, I don't know if did either of you read the facts I wrote on the agenda by any chance?
No.
Okay, then don't, because it'll make it more exciting. This has some really interesting hypothetical what-if scenarios from a production standpoint, and I think you can probably assume what some of them are, but I think that the slapstick stuff is actually really good. I think the fact that they expanded to 4 villains as opposed to 2 is good because, like, that combination with Home Alone 1 and 2 is so good. You just weren't going to get another duo, right?
Yeah, I agree there. If you try to do another 2 guys, everyone's just going to be like, oh, these are like dollar store Joe Pesci and I forget the actor of Marv or whatever.
We'll just say Joe Pesci and Marv like we did in Home Alone 2.
I forget Joe Pesci's name in the movie and I forget the other guys, like the other actors'
How about we just go with the Wet Bandits?
Yeah, the Wet Bandits.
Or
Yeah,
the
you were
Sticky
never
Bandits.
if you put just 2 people, they were going to be like, yeah, these are just the cheaper versions of these. So I give you're right there. Going with 4 people makes it seem like it's a fresher concept.
And then the other thing I wanted to say is that in many different things, you can't tone things down. After Home Alone 1 and 2, you can't tone it down. So the fact that they said, you know what, these were freaking spies. Like the Wet Bandits, the Sticky Bandits, they were dumb, goofy. No, these are like legit people, right? So I like the fact that they took that but gave it a comedic spin. I think the problem is that ultimately what happens is the same as the other films, right? Like when it's time to just like, here we go, this is where they try to infiltrate the house, as cool as a lot of the things looked, and, the kid was very clever, and we'll talk about the kid. I think he's by far the weakest part of the film. Sorry, but he just was. It's just another Home Alone. And in 97, I think if this is one of the cases that I think if it came out shortly after 2, it will be better received than now, because then I think people would be like a similar age. I mean, we're talking about a couple of years difference. We're talking about nearing the 2000s. There's been a whole lot of child stuff,
but
like
maybe
child
it was
films.
Made for like the next generation of younger kids. I think having it too close, I think people would have been more up in arms that Macaulay Culkin wasn't in it.
Yeah.
I think they kind of needed that time of that breathing room.
And they had to wait for something called puberty to happen.
Yeah. And I'll agree with you, Juan, that is it a great movie? No, I don't think it's like an unwatchable movie. I think it's actually very watchable. It's just, there's nothing special about it, but it's not something I was like basically had to really fight to get through. Like, would I watch it again if it was on TV? maybe if I had a few drinks in me, but otherwise probably not.
Yeah, I agree totally. It's not bad. It's just kind of forgettable in the way that beyond a couple of the big stunts and the insanely over the top plot, it's hard to remember what exactly happens in that movie, mostly because it moves very fast to get everything it needs to get in there. A lot of like plot explanation that you're kind of left going like, okay. And then all of a sudden we're at the end and you're left going like, okay, well, that was an hour and a half of my life.
I just remembered another key thing that it's missing. So the intro, you hear the classic Home Alone theme, but from there on out, the soundtrack takes a huge dip. And I think the soundtrack of the first two movies, like, you don't realize how much that helps make the film even better.
You know, the where he does the second montage, like the second, gathering the items, setting up the home. That's when I noticed it, because they went with this like 90s tuned rock theme, and I'm like, dude,
some Simple Plan dollar store version.
That's when it was like, this doesn't feel like Home Alone. Like the soundtrack for Home Alone was like so good that it's definitely noticeable when they tried to put in, some more modern music.
Definitely. So something I'd actually like to get to in the movie is just some fun little tidbits here, because first of all, so Alex is the main actor, right? The protagonist. But then the family, this is where, once again, you get to see some similarities, some differences. The mother, whose name, the character name is Karen Pruitt. I hope I got it right. I mean, she's a carbon copy of Kevin's mother. From the coat to the hair color. It's clearly like, we couldn't get that thing done, so we're just swapping her out. What did you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think
you pretty much summed it up.
I watched it with my girlfriend, and she was pointing out like the same hair color and everything. Like they were like, she wears like a similar jacket and everything. They were really trying to hit that note. So she
to
was
the point
like,
where they had the zoom in close up of her going, Alex.
So she was like the $5 or below store version of Kevin's mom, but then the Buzz ripoff, he's like, worse than the Dollar General.
He's Dollar Tree.
He's like the 50 cent, or he's like the penny store version of Buzz. Like he looked like he belonged on a crappy Nickelodeon TV show. You know what I mean? Like he just did not belong there, and he was awful.
And boy, if you want to talk about like child actors who go much further than what you would think from this movie, Scarlett Johansson is in this movie, and wow, was her acting chops not quite there yet.
Yeah,
in this movie.
This is her first big role. Which, I mean, for better or worse, you put your name on a Home Alone on a resume, and I mean, that's worth something, right? But it is so weird, because every time I looked at her, I'm like, it's you, right? It's so rare that you get to see this child actor that became part of one of the biggest cinematic universes in like movie history. Here she is in Home Alone 3. And then the other thing that I thought was the father, so forgettable, I'm not even going to like get to him. The neighbor, the old lady, that's where I went like, okay, man, come on. Home Alone 1, you had like the old evil dude, like neighbor, old man. Here now, he's a lady. I just thought it was so lazy. Like, come on, man. You can't even try.
I will say this. They didn't go like old man shoveling snow to like pigeon lady. They didn't pull that. Like Mrs. Hess was not that character. They didn't really do that character at all. So that's why I'm trying to say this isn't like the Terminator 3, because they weren't doing every single thing exactly the same. So again,
maybe on the big bullet point scale, I disagree
of course.
with
I mean,
you.
every Home Alone
box.
Yeah, if you just do a Home Alone movie where there isn't all the crazy stuff at the end, then is it even really a Home Alone movie? But like I said, they didn't have to check every single box. So I appreciate that. Because if they tried to make Mrs. Hess like the same thing, you'd be like, okay, come on. And I think because they tried to do things a little bit differently, that's what makes it more watchable than if they tried to hit every single note and just miss the mark on everything.
That's true. Now, as far as I recall, whenever we talk about these movies, we definitely dedicate like 70% of the conversation to the villains, because I mean the Wet Bandits, the Sticky Bandits, their chemistry alone, forget about what they're doing. It's just them being together on screen was what made that special. Now, here we have 4 different cast members. Even though I have the names of the characters here, I mean, damn, that's forgettable, right? I think it's just 4 evil spy dudes and a gal. What do you guys think about their chemistry?
You got long-haired dude. You've got Fox Mulder wannabe.
You got 2 dudes.
You've got
it's like
the
long-haired dude. He's like that
lady.
He'd be like on Rocket Power or something. Would not he totally would be a Rocket Power.
He'd
man.
be telling people about the ancient Hawaiians and stuff.
Okay, so Keith, what's your take on their connection? Because I mean, this is 180. Personality-wise, they are in no way like the Wet or Sticky Bandits. What did you think of their chemistry between the 4?
That's where most of the slapstick comes from in this movie, in my opinion, where they needed bodies, warm bodies for Alex to torture, basically. And they play that role well. So you have the different like archetypes of a child or like a children's movie villain, and they kind of just hit all of them with there. Like you've got the mastermind, the plotting one, that's where a lot of like the thought behind the movie comes from. You have the dumb silly one who's got to always, he's the one of the 3 stooges that gets slapped in the head afterwards. Then you've got the woman, the athletic one, and then you have the one that just kind of rounds it out. And beyond that, I don't really think there's much to their characters beyond just being warm bodies for Alex to torture inside of that house.
Also guns. Just guns.
Yeah.
There's just flat out
talking
guns
about
in this
escalation.
movie.
Like they just at one point, like the kid just pulls a gun out on one of them.
I was like, what if this movie just took a really dark turn and Alex just shot one of them in the head, like,
and he thinks it's the bubble gun, and then he really just shoots them in the abdomen, and they bleed out.
The whole movie just comes to a screeching halt, and Alex spends the rest of his life in prison. Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah,
he'd be out at 18. That's how your judicial system works anyway.
It ends just with him going to juvie, I guess.
God, that's a way better
Home Alone
movie.
4 there.
Yeah. Man,
but
they need more movies like that where it's just going one direction.
Yeah. You know what? They
then
made like 13 of them, and they're called Saw. Not the movie you're
not
looking
like
for.
That. No, a movie where it's like the tone is this way, and then all of a sudden something happens. And it just goes in a completely different direction. If you haven't seen the movie $1 Million Baby, that's a movie like that.
Or Cabin in the Woods would be another example.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
100%.
That's what, I was thinking about that.
I appreciate those kind of movies, but this is not that movie at all.
No.
Yeah, the villains just I like how the woman, because she was like Russian or whatever, she just was an Olympian randomly, like without any explanation at all.
Are you telling me, Ryan, that in a late 90s film, we're filled with nothing but stereotypes for evil characters? What the hell's wrong with you, Ryan? As a Latinx, like I fully expect to rob a house because my name is Juan, dude. Come on.
Hold on. What is it with like 90s kids in movies and having like pets, like super intelligent pet companions? Like he had 2. He had the parrot and the mouse.
Dude, that mouse
were
is
both
badass.
Yeah. I don't know what the deal is with that, but
seems
to happen
come out before this or after this?
I think it might have came out the same year, if I had to guess.
I think that's definitely there were a lot of trends about animals being super
so
smart.
It was the same year.
Okay,
but when did Babe, a Pig in the City come out? Because that's the OG of smart animals. Actually, I guess Charlotte's Web is the first one, but
Babe was 1995.
That pig, he blazed trails.
That'll do, pig.
He did.
That'll do.
So talking a little bit about the whole traps process, I mean, that's arguably the funnest part of these movies. Like of any Home Alone, good acting, bad acting. You get to see some violence, and it's family-friendly violence on the holiday season, just like Die Hard.
Unscripted, uncensored.
Exactly. So Ryan, how do you like that violence, Ryan? You like that violence, Ryan?
I will say the only time I laughed during the movie is when that guy sat in the chair, basically
electricity up the ass.
Yeah, like the fact that two of these guys got their asses blown out
Consecutively.
It was so, but it was like the amount he was getting electrocuted. He like electrocuted so much he came up and like hit the wall and then sat back down. Like it was so absurd that I actually did legitimately laugh because it was so ridiculous. But yeah, I will admit there were times where it was like it had its moments, but it was just like so much absurdity. But I did think the one where the guy got his like feet stuck in those two like what are those
like
little,
Mega Blocks containers?
Those little those blocks containers with the wheels on it. I thought that was pretty good.
I did my best to watch this movie, and especially this part, in the same lens that I would watch the Home Alone 2 movies. And I tried to count how many times that the kid had committed murder throughout the scenes of that, and I lost
favorite
count
part about Home Alone
very
movies.
quick. And it's just it's another example of like escalation that this movie does, where you have the scenes of like, okay, well, let's drop a brick on the Wet Bandits' head in Home Alone 2. Well, screw it, this time we're dropping a crate full of bricks this time. Why do one brick when you can have 18?
Yeah, and a like manual lawnmower or whatever.
Yeah,
like
they like it. Thank God this is a kid's movie, because they literally, like, that dude's face should have been chopped into like 500 pieces with a working lawnmower going into his skull. And just the absurdity that happens with that, or them jumping out of a house into a pool and not just shattering their legs, and a bunch of things like that.
Guys,
this movie is violent. Like, my God.
The main character pulls out a shotgun to shoot a child, and then
shoots himself.
He literally got a shotgun
on the carpet.
up his ass. Up his ass, and he's alive.
That's 3 people that got their asses blown out.
It's like, man. And then the one part of the movie that I'm like, who says that? So I get it's like, can somebody check this movie's rating? I'm assuming it's PG. I mean, it's got to be, it can't be G, so I'm assuming it's got to be PG, where the really skinny guy, you know, he's got like the hole through his pants, so the rat is in his genital area. Yeah. So then the female hits him to try to get the rat, and then he says,
I like how she swings horizontally.
Yeah, right. There's no better way to go about that, and this movie is PG.
Okay. But then he says, "You smashed my winky." I'm like, who the hell?
Yeah. He said it with fury too. He's like, "You smashed my winky,"
but a lot louder, like higher pitch. So it's like, "You smashed my winky."
Why is that Mickey? Why is that Mickey?
I don't know.
Oh, you smashed my winky.
Oh boy, my winky. Oh no.
I think the most, again, I can't get away from the parrot in this movie. So if you could forgive me. When they're in the igloo, right at the end, the guy who gets away.
Okay, that part.
The parrot has the ability to bargain. Like, he is that intelligent. He's offered a cracker and he knows he already made a deal for 2, and then he lights a match and sets off fireworks. A parrot does this. I know parrots are intelligent, but they are not that intelligent.
But goddamn.
That was my favorite part of the movie, because it's not that he lit the match up, it's how. It's that you could tell his face is like, you don't mess up, man. Boom, sets that up, and I just love it. It's so stupid. It's literally like the final part of the movie, and it's got to be my favorite one.
He's like, your life isn't worth 2 crackers, hey? All right. Let's dance then.
Now, usually I'll leave this for like our after the full review of the movie. I don't think there's a lot more we can get into it, but that is until I read all of this, which I had never. This is my first time ever knowing all this stuff. Like just before we hit record, and I'm like, oh man, there's some fun hypothetical stuff. So This comes to us from multiple websites, and I will credit them at the end because I totally forgot to write those down. So I'll look for that afterwards. And the first fact here is the film was pitched at the same time as Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, and it was planned to be produced simultaneously with Home Alone 2. However, those plans fell through. So what do you guys think that it wasn't that it was going to be Home Alone 2 and 3? So the intention was that with Kevin, they were going to be making two different Home Alone movies, or I don't know how that was going to work, but clearly he was part of that picture and they were going to work on them together. What's your take on that?
At that point, I just feel bad for, like, why haven't they called Child and Family Services on those parents yet if it happened to Kevin again?
I mean, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think at that point they noticed, hey, if we want to capitalize on this Home Alone thing, we can't wait another 2 years because Macaulay Culkin will be too old. So they wanted to film probably both at the same time.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So they could, still have cute child Kevin in the movies. And then of course, it fell through. So that's why eventually when they could get it greenlit, they needed a new actor.
It's interesting, though. I keep kind of going back and forth about this since we talked about it earlier, but say that happened and Macaulay Culkin was the kid in this, would that actually benefit this movie? Because you run the risk of, because pretty much it is the same movie, and the payoff would be the same, just a little with higher stakes with the traps at the end of it. Would people have just gone, well, it's more of the same, like, oh, it's not that different from Home Alone 2, so it's a bad movie anyway? Like, is that something that actually would have benefited, or is it a case that even though it didn't really deliver with what it wanted to do, like, did time actually help give this movie more of a shot?
It still would have been better with Macaulay Culkin, I think, if it was the same exact movie but with Macaulay Culkin
imagine it came out a year later. So let's say this comes out in 93.
If you had all the same like family and everything, I think but the plot was exactly like Home Alone 3, like you still have like these other terrorist people or whatever. I do think it would have been a better movie. It probably would still be the weakest movie of the trilogy, but I do think the better actors would have made it a much better film.
Yeah, plus I think you have Kevin, who is self-aware that he's already gone through this stuff before, so it's a lot easier to understand, like, well, it's Kevin. Of course he wouldn't struggle to, build all this stuff, whereas you have a brand new kid, you're seeing him for the first time, and then he's younger than Kevin. If we're thinking like years have gone past, like this is 1997. So think about that kid that watched Home Alone 2 in 1992. Many years have gone by. And then here comes a lame new film that's basically another kid doing the same stuff. And I think whether you had the Wet Sticky Bandits or just this whole new cast, it would have been interesting. And I think it maybe would have been more tongue in cheek, like, hey, third time's the charm, right? I totally see them doing that because they did it with Home Alone 2. The whole concept was like, we did it again. Can you imagine? It's like, how many more times can we do that? And then Home Alone 4 is just him being taken away from his family. But
I think with 3, like if they had it play out, yeah, I know the parents thing, this is a little bit more realistic how they do it. So if Kevin's parents just left him for like an hour at a time, it's not the same. It doesn't seem as absurd of like, oh, they really forgot him a third time, like give me a break. And I think that's why they did this the way that they did, because as good as the Home Alone movies are, I think a lot of people after the second one made jokes, and I think they were self-aware that it's a little ridiculous that they would forget a second time, so they really couldn't go that route in Home Alone 3.
Exactly. So these comes to us from homealone.fandom.com, by the way.
Wow. There's a lot of dedicated people out there.
Remember, seriously, everybody's a fan of something on the internet.
Yeah, and I think it's like in hindsight, you kind of forget how amazingly popular Macaulay Culkin was, right? Like you had Richie Rich as well, so it's not just this. But then here's where it gets really interesting, involving the Culkmeister. The idea for a third Home Alone movie was revived in the mid-90s. Early drafts called for Culkin to return as a teenage version of his character. However, Culkin dropped out of acting. As a result, the idea was changed to an entirely new film centering on a new cast of characters. It was filmed in Chicago and Evanston, Illinois, with the airport scenes being shot in 2 different concourses at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. What would you guys have thought? Because notice in all 3 films, we still have a child being lost, right? Whether it be in New York or at home. Say it was Kevin or even Alex, but you have a teen. Let's call him like 14 years old. Basically the age of the brother, kind of give or take, right? Would that make it better, worse, samesies?
I don't think this concept works if you go into the realm of teenager, because once the protagonist can defend himself, then you're encroaching on Saw territory there. Like, why do you need these elaborate contraptions when you could just go at them with a baseball bat?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Once you're 14, you're kind of regularly left home alone at that point. I mean, you're in high school, for Christ's sake. So
yeah.
It's like,
Home Alone 4 would just be like Saturday.
True.
Yeah, so he'd be getting like his paintball gun and a baseball bat and just lighting them up.
Yeah, and then you have the first Saw movie.
Now, in the podcast history, this is going to be the most convoluted, overly explained part. So logically, Ryan, do you have the document open by any chance? I didn't ask you for this. Okay, so could you read fact number C, my friend?
Number C. It's my favorite number.
Number C. Oh my God. Could you read fact C? Fact C.
God, what a train wreck this one is.
Damn it.
My God.
All right. The plan to get the chip back was an overcomplicated, risky, and time-consuming one. The 4 criminals knew the description of Mrs. Hess and the neighborhood she lives in. They could have knocked on the door of one of the houses and asked for a woman that matches her description, and when her neighbor told them which house it is, they would have knocked on her door and given her bread back and then to get on her good side. She would then not have any reason not to tell them that she gave the toy car to Alex as payment or where he lived. Then Peter and Alice could have posed as a couple, just like they did with Mrs. Hess in the movie, and claim the toy was meant for their child and offer the family a sum of money, which they have, and as they buy an entire house to stake out the neighborhood. They would have gotten the chip the very same night and been on their way. Wow. Someone really thought this through, and that is damn good. But then you wouldn't have a movie.
That's true.
It's like, can you imagine? It's like, oh, here, can you have the toy back? Sure. Credits roll.
Yeah. See, there's so many things. It's like, oh, why didn't they just do that? The explanation to any major plot hole in a movie is, but then you wouldn't have the movie.
Yep. And another interesting thing here is Home Alone 3 was the last film of the series to be released theatrically, not theoretically. Theatrically. Theoretically.
I mean, if you want to go theoretically, it was probably the last all right one.
Hey, if we get another Home Alone film that does make a theater release, then theoretically, this was the last one. Home Alone 4 came out in 2002. And someday we'll be talking about that. And Home Alone Holiday Heist came out in 2012. So bad, I guess they didn't even put a number on it. People, it's just the Holiday Heist.
Yeah, and isn't there supposed to be like a Disney Plus series coming out, or did that get canned?
I mean, how many episodes can a kid get lost in though? I don't know.
Why do I feel like there's
question.
like a WWE superstar in the Holiday Heist one?
Probably. It's what was it, 2012? Dude, there's got to be probably Big Show's in there or something.
I have a fun fact that I will share with Holiday Heist. I have a direct connection to that movie. So there's a teaser for 2 years from now.
You're not going to share. You're gonna.
No, I said I'll share it. I'll share it when we get to Holiday Heist.
You asshole!
Wow,
yeah.
You asshole, man.
But there is a direct connection to something that happened in my life that is connected to Home Alone Holiday Heist.
Oh, this is actually interesting, and it would make sense with this film. At one stage, the script was considered to be filmed as a television pilot, but in the end, the studio decided to go ahead and make it as a feature film. This one could totally get away with that because, as Ryan mentioned, since he's not home alone all day, the episodes could be when he's alone. It's like, well, does he catch him this time? And honestly, that would not have been a bad plot. It would have been like one season, probably, right? I mean, can you imagine like 10 seasons of that?
Yeah. Episode 1, it happens. Episode 2, they install a security system. That's the end of the series.
Pretty much. So as Ryan does his research, I'm not sure what he's looking at, but he's got the
I'm trying to
research
find. I remember there was some Christmas movie that like Paige or The Miz was in, and I was trying to figure out if it was this movie.
I don't think it's that one.
Isn't that the one where Rusev pulls a gun on somebody?
No, that's just a totally different movie.
I want every movie to be that, though.
So Keith, what's your
Yes.
take on using this film as an example, and after Terminator, actually, I think that we as a podcast have gotten to a point where I think we've definitely realized there's a trend in movies where after the second one or after a variation, as many characters as they may change, largely it's still the same film. Are you aware of that when you watch these films and it takes you out? Like when you watch a Home Alone 3, when you watch one of the later Terminators, like even Dark Fate, are you able to suspend that thought of, well, this is just this, but not as good as that? Like, are you able to suspend that, or is that something you're aware of?
I'm very aware of it because much like any idea that's out there, there's a bit of a diminishing return on it where every time you go to that well again, you run the risk of it being not as good as the first time. And you see that a lot in movies and in pop culture when they just keep going sequel after sequel after sequel. And if you're naming something as that sequel, you're inviting those comparisons to it. So for this being Home Alone 3, I feel like it's hard not to compare it to Home Alone 2. And that's where you get the analogy that I came up with earlier. So to me, it's a fair comparison because it's right in the title, and you run the risk of just going to the well one too many times. And I think that's what we saw with Home Alone 3. They just took one too many buckets out of that well.
Ryan, I don't know if you have anything. You kept looking forward. I'm like, oh, does he have some like sexy information for us?
Yeah, I was trying to think of, when is the third movie ever really, really good in a series? And the only answer I can think of off the top of my head is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, that's a great movie. But most of the time, like Keith said, it's diminishing returns. But going in and knowing, okay, this doesn't have Macaulay Culkin, I can set my expectations, set the bar lower, which is why I said it's not a great movie. It's not a good movie, but it's a watchable movie. I didn't hate it, but it's just a much more forgettable movie and just doesn't have the heart and spirit that you had in the first two. But there's definitely worse sequels out there. But yeah, it's just hard, especially a third movie. It just had a lot of things going against it. Change of cast and it being the third movie. It's really hard to get a win there. It's really more, hey, let's milk this franchise for all we can get out of it.
And Ryan, I believe the movie you were looking for earlier is Santa's Little Helper.
Yes, that's
with
what I was
Miz
thinking
and
of.
Paige.
Yep.
Ryan,
that's all.
You
I
got
know.
that closure because I guarantee you, if we ended this episode and none of us got the movie name right, somebody would be like, "Come on, guys, you can't be doing that. You can't be like bringing up a movie and then not actually making reference to it." So, Ryan, what's your takeaway? Keith and I had a little conversation there about just, hey, sometimes the third movie, as you mentioned, is not necessarily all that necessary or anything like that. Are you more curious now? I'm going to switch the question with you. Are you curious as to venturing into possibly reaching a movie trilogy where it's like the third movie is better than the other two?
I would like to know, Indiana Jones aside, I'd like to know if that exists anywhere. So I mean, some people will vouch for Tokyo Drift, right? In Fast and Furious. And Tokyo Drift has only gotten better with age, in my opinion, because the other movies are so absurd now that you're just like, oh, this movie's pretty good now.
Yeah.
There's a hard break that happens after Tokyo Drift where they become totally different movies. So you almost have to separate the first three and then the rest of them.
Fast and Furious, as in the fourth one, was like the last time it was about racing. From then on, it's about
Dwayne Johnson and his giant muscles.
Yeah. It's about like super terrorists being stopped that are more competent than the ones in Home Alone 3.
That is very true. So everybody, I'd actually like to open up that pretty awesome question to all of you, which is, which film is not as good, okay? A film that is better than the other two, because I think we can always make the case for, hey, this film was just as good. Toy Story 3 comes to mind. Amazing film, right? I know it's very difficult sometimes to rank them, but
I will say Revenge of the Sith is better than 1 and 2.
I would agree.
That's a good one. Yeah. So what are some of the best third movies in a series? And that's a good point, Keith. Revenge of the Sith. If you isolate the prequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith is by far the best.
We should make some kind of episode about this, even just like checking out some information about that later, because it truly is an interesting
They're out there.
topic.
Yeah. But it's rarer than even when the sequel outdoes the original, is to have the third movie be the best of the three. It ain't easy.
Definitely.
Being
So
squeezy.
people, as those on the video version, Keith bids you a visual farewell. Keith, say farewell. No, Ryan, this is the final episode of 2020. So as Keith is doing that, Ryan, close off the year with a sexy, positive message.
Well, 2020 has been a dumpster fire of a year, but I think we at least try to bring some fun to the podcast, and we just thank everyone for the support. We're still this very small community, but this year alone, I think our Discord has become a much more active and fun place to hang out. So definitely we encourage everyone to join us over at the Discord at castthepast.com/Discord. And we just are happy to keep doing this. We're a very small podcast, but we love doing this.
We have a big heart.
We've had no signs of slowing down. We really
Unlike
like what
Home
we're doing.
Alone 3, we have heart.
Yes. And we just thank everyone who's stuck around from the beginning, and we appreciate all the new people who have come along this year, and hope to keep providing some escapism from a lot of the crappiness that's out there right now.
Exactly. If you are listening to us and in any way we've made you laugh, we've made you smile, as far as I'm concerned, that's our job and we've done it. And I just wanted to take a moment as we wind down 2020 for whatever this year was. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. If you're on the Discord with us, thank you for interacting and chatting and just really doing a deep dive on these nerdy things that we love. And if you haven't joined us yet, come join us. It's fun. There's no crazy. We keep the crazy out of there. We'd like to have fun. We have fun on Discord, Maggle. And the only crazy that happens on there are the insane pictures of food that I post where I consume 10,000 calories in one shot.
So good.
Yeah,
good
the
times.
Charcuteries.
Love me some charcuteries. All right, let's talk about charcuteries for a minute, then I'll let y'all go. On the Discord, Midnight Outlaw, shout out, made the comparison that charcuterie boards are like adult Lunchables.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind because it's so true. Yet so
I'm pretty sure charcuteries
broken
existed
down.
before Lunchables. It's
True.
not like Lunchables was the OG.
Lunchables, the kids version of that.
I understand that, but as somebody that grew up in this generation, I met Lunchables before I met charcuterie boards.
That's
to
true.
me, that is the evolution of it.
They're becoming more of a thing.
They're nice.
So,
It's
Trader
just people
Joe's, man.
People like to pick food It's just fun.
It's expensive though. Like
Oh, yeah.
my girlfriend
No,
will
we,
go to Trader Joe's to do the charcuterie stuff, and it's like you'll end up spending almost $100.
Yeah, no, that one that I posted on the Discord, we made from scratch, and yeah, it was about $50 for everything.
It's good stuff though, and seriously, like we have a pretty good idea of some of the games and the movies that we'll be talking about next year, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I think that speaking to the two of you first, and then everybody listening, this podcast helped me get through a lot of the crap in this year, just because it's like there's always something to look forward to. The fact that the three of us, we were already, speaking through a camera into a microphone, and then 2020 just kind of normalized that. It's like, well, we were already kind of doing that, so not much changes there. Exactly. And then, the other day I had somebody on my Twitch actually join and say like, hey, you guys are, I've been binging some of your content, getting me through long work days and all that. And seriously, we really do appreciate it. We know that this is a very non-traditional podcast, but because of all of you, we have reached over 8,000 listeners on podcast apps. So thank you for that. Our YouTube channel is still growing.
Yeah, probably over 35,000 views on YouTube. So it's definitely had a big pickup this year, and we have over 100 episodes, right? So plenty to binge if you haven't heard everything we've done. So
exactly, and I think next year, this is going to be our third or fourth year now in the podcast. My goodness,
3.
This will be third year.
Yeah,
okay.
We're on year 3. We just had our 2-year anniversary.
Exactly. So I think now this is easily going to be our best year, because what we learned, at least what I learned as a co-host of the podcast, is we enjoy, reviewing film after film or like selecting games more strategically. And I think that 2021 is going to be where we know that works for us, right? So now it's like we get to do that from January forward, as opposed to this year that we kind of realized that halfway and we started to make some adjustments. And I think that's going to be really good. But people,
rest in peace, Diablo 2. I'll see you someday.
Diablo someday. We should do at some point. It's like the 20 games that were cut.
Yeah, this is what didn't make the cut.
Yeah, definitely.
All right,
then
I'm holding back a sneeze, so let's wrap this up.
All right. Okay, people. I'm not going to even change the camera for the video version for added pressure. Up until next time, up until 2021, thank you for being part of this sexy, awesome experience. And we will be back with another exciting edition of A Cast
to the
Past.
Don't sneeze, Ryan. Don't
Don't
sneeze.
do
in
it.
2021.
See you next year,
It might have
people.
went away.
Or next Sunday.